Shalom, this is Rabbi Yehoishophot Oliver coming to you on the 9th of November 2020, which is also the 22nd of Cheshvan, Tavshin Pei Aleph. So I will start by reading out to you a recent post of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, our great, mighty leader, our king. So he writes, Patachnu hayom et hamischar b'chaniyot harachov. Today we've opened up the business on the stores in the streets. K'dei limnoa aliyah mechudeshet shel hatachluah, in order to prevent a new rise of sickness. אנחנו מאפשרים פתיחה עד 4 לקוחות בכל עת. So how generous. We're allowing an opening for up until 4 customers at a time. תוך שמירה קפדנית על ריחוק והיגיינה. We're going to be very particular on distancing and hygiene. אנחנו עדיין נמצאים בשלב מוקדם של החזרה לשגרה. We're still at an early stage of returning to routine. ולכן אנו בוחנים כל הזמן את ההשפעות של ההקלות והפתיחה המדורגת בשלבים הראשונים. Therefore, we're constantly checking the influence of the easing of the restrictions, and we're using a phased opening, reopening in the early stages, כדי למנוע התפרצות של הקורונה, in order to prevent another outbreak of corona. אני מבקש מכם, I ask you לשמור בקפדנות על הכללים, to keep the rules carefully, ועל ההנחיות and the directives, כדי שנוכל להתקדם בחזרה, so we can move forward to return לשגרה, to the routine, עד שנביא את החיסונים לאזרחי ישראל, until we bring the vaccines to the citizens of the state of Israel. So there you have it. Mr. Netanyahu has declared that these restrictions will be in place until there is a mass, likely forced vaccination imposed on the people. And this is the same script, the same language that all the other world leaders, many world leaders have been using. Daniel Andrews in Victoria, Australia, also Scott Morrison in Australia, Boris Johnson in England, Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, Justin Trudeau in Canada, and so on and so forth. They're all made out of the same cloth. They're all collaborating. They're all puppets and actors obeying directives from some central command in some boardroom in some secret location. They're all the enemies of the people. They are pretending to be leaders, to be caring for the well-being of their respective nations, but in reality, they are traitors. They're betraying their peoples, and they are betraying the world. They're all reading out from the same script. It's clearly all been planned in advance in great detail. Has the same agenda for the same psychological operation, the same mind control program for the world. And their ultimate goal is that we take the vaccine, and the vaccine will be deadly. One way or another, they want to cull the population. They want a worldwide cull. Maybe they don't want it. They are the tools of some secret society behind the scenes who wants it. Maybe they're just being used for that purpose, but it really doesn't matter. That is what is going on. This has all been staged in order to lull us further and further into complacency, into obedience, into compliance. And then they want to use the vaccine in particular and other means as well, including so-called internment camps, which are really concentration camps, which are really death camps for mass depopulation. A worldwide Holocaust. One that will make the Holocaust that we call by that name look like a picnic. And they've already passed laws exempting themselves from liability for adverse effects from the vaccines. And one of the adverse effects from vaccines is death, or vaccine injury, or sterility. They want to bring a Holocaust on us, and therefore the only thing left for us to do is to resist. The key to the success of their evil plan is our cooperation. That's the one thing that they need. That's the purpose of all the propaganda. That's the purpose of the fines. That's the purpose of all the social pressure in the news and in the advertisements and all the speeches from the government. It's all designed to win our compliance. The key to, God willing, foiling this evil plan is our active resistance. Some form of active resistance. Even passive resistance is good, but it's not enough. For example, you can stay home and not go out without a mask. But at some point you have to go out. You have to have the courage to be different, to stand out, to show that you reject the propaganda, you reject the lies, and that you won't, not only do you reject it, but you're proud to reject it. I'm sure many other people inside doubt the official story, but they're too embarrassed, too afraid, too cowardly to do anything about that inner skepticism that they feel. We must refuse to comply as much as possible. So in this spirit, I'll read out a little bit from this book. And here it speaks about a little resistance that took place against the Nazi regime. So here on page 257, he writes, "The university environment had not been particularly noticeable for active resistance to the Nazi movement. There was considerable passive resistance, including withdrawal into scholarly isolation. It is apparent that as members of the elite stratum of German society, university students had become disenchanted with the Nazi regime. For some students, this contempt ultimately led to acts of resistance, regardless of how futile they may have appeared. The outstanding example is the White Rose Group at the University of Munich. Hans Scholl was a medical student at the University of Munich who had been a zealous member of the Hitler Youth. He came to be extremely disenchanted with the Hitlerian system, especially after becoming aware of the Nazi euthanasia program for cripples and mental defectives. Hans Scholl had also seen the nature of German occupation policies in the East as a result of service in the Wehrmacht. In May of 1942, Scholl and his friends Christoph Probst, Alex Schmorell, and Willy Graf joined professor of philosophy Kurt Huber to begin writing, printing, and distributing leaflets against the government. They were soon joined by Hans's sister Sophie, an undergraduate studying biology and philosophy at the university. They signed their pamphlets "The White Rose" as a symbol of purity. These conspirators were aware that their opposition was not that significant, but they felt that someone had to make a beginning against such a criminal regime. German youth, they argued, had been deceived by a ruthless regime and made into godless murderers and stupid Führer followers. Students had a responsibility to sabotage a regime that had inflicted horrible bloodshed on all of Europe. One pamphlet stated, "And now every convinced opponent of National Socialism must ask himself how he can fight against the present state in the most effective way, how he can strike it in the most telling blows. Through passive resistance, without a doubt. We cannot provide each man with the blueprint for his acts. We can only suggest them in general terms, and he alone will find the way of achieving this end." Right? There must be resistance. Exactly what form that resistance should take, each individual has to decide for himself or herself. I continue. "Try to convince all your acquaintances, including those in the lower social classes, of the senselessness of continuing, of the hopelessness of this war, of our spiritual and economic enslavement at the hands of the National Socialists, of the destruction of all moral and religious values, and urge them to passive resistance." And then, predictably, these pamphlets led to the members of this group becoming arrested and executed. But be that as it may, there was a call to resistance. A call by courageous individuals who had a strong sense of conscience, a strong moral sensibility, a strong sense of justice, a strong desire for the best interest of their people and of humanity, to speak out, to call for resistance. What form, in our time, what form will this resistance take on? It could mean not wearing a mask. It could mean defying the taboo against shaking people's hands, give people a hug. It could mean not sitting at a distance from other people. It could mean inviting people over to your house when that's not allowed or it's discouraged or what have you. It could mean making your own prayer gathering when that's discouraged or not allowed. It could mean many things. It could definitely mean speaking out, telling your friends and acquaintances, telling your family, and whoever will listen about the gross flaws in the official COVID story, the dangers of blind obedience to supposed emergency measures, the way that such measures have been used against us in the past, and especially the idea of health has been used against us. What did the Nazis do before they herded Jews into the gas chambers and many other people into the gas chambers? They told them they need to disinfect for their health, delouse Hey, it's for the sake of health. The Nazis employed doctors. Yes, doctors worked for the Nazis, but they did euthanasia, not even by request, just killing of the elderly, of people with disabilities, people with mental illnesses at first, and then later on they carried out cruel experiments on people in the camps. And so they were doctors. So just because something is being promoted in the name of health and is being promoted by doctors, doctors are able to be compromised and corrupted. Health officials, public health officials, they are very prone to corruption and evil. And if you go down the rabbit hole of researching that topic in modern times, you'll see that. All the people who blindly accept the official story of COVID are people who simply have no knowledge of the history of the WHO, the history of the CDC, the history of all these public health organizations are filled with scandals and very questionable policies and issues. The first thing is to have courage to express skepticism publicly of the narrative. Go against the flow. You're in a WhatsApp group. You're on a private Facebook group. You're just on your own Facebook wall. Or you're talking to your friend. Say something that shows that you question the mainstream narrative. If that's all there is to it, point out some flaw, some anomaly in the official story. Do something. Express resistance. Exactly how you'll do that depends. As these students wrote, we cannot provide each man with the blueprint for his acts. We can only suggest them in general terms, and he alone will find the way of achieving this end. So, we're not yet at that point that was described by those students, but we may be coming close to it soon. So therefore the time is now, while we still have the opportunity to speak out against the encroachment of this totalitarian police state, New World Order, one world government, to speak out against the tyranny that is overtaking our communities, overtaking our society, overtaking our world. God bless.